to let you know this. And if you have any troubles, you can always turn off the camera. And we have two speakers today. So we have Ida from the Student in the Politics, and we have Hush from ORAS. So as I mentioned earlier, this event is conducted in collaboration with DISS and VSSD. So let's give an opportunity to get introduced to DISS. And over to you, Anna.
So DISS, Delft International Student Society. My name is Anna Bazarova, and I'm External Affairs Manager. We organize different cultural and career-related events for the welfare of student community. Our association is more than 10 years old. New board has started since the month of October. There is currently 5 board members and 3 committee members. We have collaboration with most of the student associations, like today with VSSD. And we hope you enjoy today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for introducing DISS. And we have Anushri to introduce VSSD. Over to you, Anushri.
Hi everyone, I am Anushri. I work for National International Student Relation in Delft. I would like to hand over this to Thomas to introduce VSSD.
Oh yeah, I'm not muted. Thanks, Anusha. Yeah, great to have you all here, and thanks Guus and Ida for being here. Yeah, VSSD is the Student Interest Association of Delft. We represent students with housing issues, also other legal services, education, in collaboration with ORAS, for example, and also student well-being. I will refer for that to our student loneliness campaign, for instance. And yeah, if you have issues or ideas, suggestions, feel free to connect us.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Thomas, for introducing VSSD. So as mentioned earlier, we have 2 speakers today, 2 wonderful speakers who would like to give you a lot of information regarding the housing. So we would also share the presentations of this event after the event is over. So we would email all the presentations to all the participants who participated, and you can always contact us if you have any housing situations. So we would always be there to help you. And I'll walk you through what is going to be the agenda for today's event. So first, we are Ida from the Student in the Politics. She'll be giving her presentation about housing situation in Delft, and that will go on for 20 minutes, and you will have a Q&A for 5 minutes. So you can also type the questions in the chat box during the presentation, and during the Q&A session, we will answer your questions. And if it's not possible because of time constraints, we would always answer your questions by email. So after that, we have Hush from ORAS. So he will be giving the second presentation about housing in Delft, especially housing frauds. So just to be sure for you. And after the presentation for 20 minutes, we'll be having a Q&A for 5 minutes. And after that, if we have time, we'll have more Q&As. So if that's not possible, and we'll conclude the event. So that's going to be the agenda for today's event. And let's go ahead with the first presentation. Over to you, Ida.
Thank you. I'll just start to share my screen. So yes, thank you so much for having me. So thank you to the VSSD and DIS for having me today. I will mainly focus on the current legislation here in the municipality of Delft. My name is Ida de Boer, and I'm currently the chairman of STIP Delft. So that is a political party in a municipality here in Delft. And one of my policy fields is student housing. And I myself study business administration in Rotterdam. But I have lived here in Delft since 2015 and lived in 3 houses. So 3 different houses, so I know a bit about different types of student housing. And so a little bit more about STIP. So STIP is a local political party here in Delft, and a fun fact, it was actually founded in 1993 because there was a lack of student housing. And because the communication with the TU Delft and with the municipality and the students was not good, and people just needed housing, and this is still a current topic and still something that we work for a lot. So it is run by students, and we have 6 seats in the city council, which makes us the 2nd biggest party here in Delft. And on the picture you can see 7 people, because we also have an alderman. Because we are part of the coalition here in Delft, we also have an alderman, Bas Vollebrecht, who works for us as well. And for today, I will first talk a bit about the context. So why is student housing actually a problem? Then I will go a bit into what the different types of students housing are here in the Netherlands, as I can imagine that coming here in the Netherlands, you don't really know what to expect and how student housing actually works. Then I will go over to what the view is of the municipality on student housing, and then talk a bit about the problems that we as STIP see with this current policy. And then I will go over to well, the perspective in Delft and some resolutions that we helped to pass to make student housing better. And afterwards, you can always ask questions, but I'd like to, if you can keep them to the last part. Oh, and if a quick thing, there are a lot of words that are really Dutch, so I try to translate them to English, but if they sound a bit weird, it's just because there are some really typical Dutch words, so I'm sorry for that. So first, in the Netherlands, there's a huge housing market saturation. So actually in every city in the Netherlands, for every group, it is currently very hard to find good housing. As you can see also in the newspapers, it says like that the housing market was never this saturated. Prices constantly rise. And starters on the housing market, at this moment, they're having a very hard time. And a small quiz where you might be able to guess the answer, but this is a graph on the average price of a house in the Netherlands. And well, the correct answer is A. So as you can see, the housing prices are just rising. So this is already one of the problems that creates a problem of finding good student housing, because the market is so sad, is that the TU Delft is actually growing a lot. And more students are looking for housing. And if it's already very saturated and there are more people looking for housing, this, of course, is a huge problem. As you can here also see that there are more students coming to TU Delft. And the last problem is actually that students have quite a bad image here in Delft, or for some people. This is, for example, due to noise disturbance. As you can see in the newspaper here, it said residents experience noise disturbance because of student flat in their neighborhood. And this is not just something that we also hear once or twice, but there are a lot of residents here in Delft that find it very hard to live together with students, but we also see that they don't get into contact with students, so they never really hear the perspective of students in Delft. It also says underneath, with a city with a lot of different types of groups, it's not weird that sometimes we clash. So that is one of the problems that together get difficulty for student housing. So you have the growth of the TU Delft, of huge housing market saturation, and a bad image of students, which makes it difficult. So next on, I will tell a bit about the different types of student housing. So this is something that for me, if I would think of student housing getting here to Delft, was just something that I had in mind, just a normal house. And that is a bit different maybe from other countries. But this is a house that has a permit so that people who are not in a relationship can live together in a normal house, because that is necessary here in the Netherlands to have a permit if you live together in a normal house and you're not in a relationship together. For a lot of students, this is the way that they live in the Netherlands as a student. And this is also often in combination with a student association. So people from the same student association live together in a house like that. So more like a frat house, you can say as well. But we also have, there are a lot of houses that are just mixed. But sometimes people only want Dutch-speaking people in this type of house because people live here for multiple years. So that can be a difficulty for international students to find a house like this, just a normal house in Delft. And these houses are privately owned, which means that you don't get any subsidy from the government, which makes it often a bit more expensive if you do find a house like this. So normally you would pay around, like, it can be 300, but it could also be 600. It really depends on who your landlord is. And yeah. So then you also have student apartments, and these are owned by student housing corporations. And that means that they also get money from the government to provide houses for people who have a bit less money. So that is students. And these are more affordable, and they can be in two types of houses. So it could be with a lot of other people living together. So it's like the picture you see, the Jacoba van Beieren, which is a big student flat, and people live together there. And these prices would be about like 300 to 400 euros, and you would get maybe 12 square meters. But the same with this housing as the last housing. If you live with multiple people, sometimes it's hard for international people to also get into these houses, because people want often want people who also speak Dutch, which makes it a bit difficult. But luckily there are also studios, and what is a good thing with these studios is that there's also an extra subsidy that you get if from the government, which makes it very cheap. So for 300 euros, you'd be able to get quite a big studio with a kitchen, and it's quite nice to live, but then you live by yourself. So for a lot of people, they think, well, I actually really like if I go to a new place that I meet people. So that's another type. And so there's also university housing, but we don't actually have that here in Delft, or if that is true, Guus can correct me afterwards. But the TU Delft, they mostly focus on really their university and on education, and they don't have like a university housing on campus really from them. And the last thing that maybe some of you guys also have seen is that there are some commercial parties who see that there are a lot of people who really need housing fast. And if you come to a new country, you need to have a place to live. And people are sometimes willing to pay a bit more from if you're an international student. And things like the student hotel in Camelot, they've seen this and they think, okay, then we'll provide like an all-inclusive type of housing, and these are a bit more expensive. So I think it's like 700 or 800, but I'm not completely sure, but it's more expensive. So it's like 2 times as expensive as the other types of housing, but they do have other benefits as well. So these are the types of sort of student housing that we have. So we have the student house, like the student apartment, well, not university housing, and the commercial parties. And the municipality of Delft has a view on how we should be with student housing. Their focus is mostly they want, if it's in Delft, to be on campus. And so that they don't have the disturbance of the students, and that the streets or the neighborhoods don't get overly sort of saturated with students. And otherwise, they think it's a good idea if there's more student housing in the region. So think of Schiedam or Rijswijk, which is quite close if you take public transport. From next year on, there will be no more permits for verkamering. So that's for a student house. So no more new permits. So that's the same reason as also why they wanted on campus. On the one hand, it's more disturbance, but on the other hand, because just the housing market is so saturated, they want to protect the houses that are still there for families, actually. But if you look at this view, there are some things that, for me, I think there's a huge problem, because we've heard there are more students coming to Delft. There's just a huge saturated market, but everything that is here, it just makes it more difficult to actually get student housing. So there are a few problems that we as STIP also have seen. So first, the TU Delft does not want to have extra housing on campus, or does not want to pay extra for that. And they do not have a campus strategy actually on housing. Or maybe it's new, then Guus can talk about that later. But so it's one of their policies of the municipality is, if it's in Delft, do it on campus. That's just almost not possible. And people don't get attached to Delft if they move to the region. And what we've also seen is that international students are probably going to be the students that will live in Rijswijk and will live in Schiedam, because they have like an urgency to actually find a place to live. If you're from the Netherlands, for example, then you can wait for a month or 2 months or 3 months and wait if you can find something that is suitable for you. But if you have to move here and there's no other place for you to stay, then international students will most likely be the ones to live in Rijswijk and Schiedam, and we don't really find that fair either. And people try to find alternatives because there's this urgency, and then it leads to, Google Translate called it slumlord. It's called huisjesmelkers for the Dutch people here. But that leads to a lot of fraud and scams. So very high prices for houses that are not worth that, but there's just a huge market for housing here in Delft, and people just need a place. No more verkamering, so no more permits, leads to a lot of studios. And that is because, so what I told about like the housing allowance that you get extra if you have just a studio. So from the government, you get more money if you have a studio or you build a studio as a housing corporation than if you build something for 2 people or 3 people. So just more studios and studios will be built. And this will lead to more loneliness as well. So those are a bit like the problems that we saw with the current legislation or the current rules here in Delft. So as STIP, we made 2 resolutions to see if we could, well, we actually made more resolutions, but 2 that made it were first about a roadmap to better student housing. And if better student housing had sort of 2 parts. So first, you really see where the places are in Delft that we are going to realize more student housing, because for the past years, there's not a lot of new buildings being built for student housing, but there are more students coming and coming. So the pressure is only rising. So we're going to really get a roadmap of where these places are going to be. And we're also going to look at ways that we as a municipality can also contribute to getting houses or housing that is also for living together, so that you not only get these studios, but there are also ways that you can live together. Secondly, we are also looking at a rental team. So this means that if there is a way that you might be scammed, that you can go to the municipality and say, hey, I'm not sure if I'm paying the right amount of money, or I'm not sure that my landlord is treating me well. Then you can go to the municipality and talk with them about that. But this is still in the progress, so it's not there yet. But hopefully in the next year or so, we will have this sort of rental team that will be able to help people with these kinds of questions. And we also tried to go against the permits system, so that it will still be allowed to have a normal house and live together in that with more people than just one or two. Because, for example, if I myself, I'm not a student anymore, and I would just want to live with two friends, it would not be possible for me now to live with two friends in a normal house. So that's something that we as STIP find quite weird. So that is also something that we wanted to accomplish, but there were just a few other parties that had the same opinion about this. So that is a bit about the about what the municipality is at the moment. I can understand that there are some questions or things that were unclear, so there's an opportunity now to ask questions. But you can also always send me an email or add me on LinkedIn or whatever if you have any more questions about this. And yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ida, for this wonderful presentation. It was really informative. And do we have Anna? Do we have any questions so far? Maybe from the registration or from the presentation that we had right now.
1 second.
Yeah.
Maybe I can abbreviate a bit for the role of the TU Delft, because it was I was called out twice in the presentation for Ida. It's not the role of the TU Delft to make student housing, because they are not. Because they can do by law. It's a university, so they can't have student houses there. So if there's a student housing on the TU Delft, that's because they rent the ground for around 100 years or so to a company like Duo, and they build a house on it. But it's not the TU Delft itself. So that's why it's also so hard to have student housing at campus.
It's just difficult with a lot of people who are pointing responsibilities to each other, and that's just what makes it really difficult. It's also not the
Policy-wise, that's the hard thing about student housing in Delft.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I have a question. So you mentioned about housing allowance, subsidies from the government. So on what criteria do the students get allowance, and what criteria they don't get the allowance?
I think it also depends on from who you are renting, if you get it or not. But I can maybe send it like a link where you can find like the correct rules about this, so that we can send that afterwards. That if people want to read about that, they can just read it there. It might be more helpful.
Yeah, perfect.
Can you send the link meanwhile?
Oh, now? Oh, I have to find.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll do it afterwards.
Yeah. Great.
Perfect. Are we having any questions, Anna?
I think we can address all the questions at the end. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So maybe we can go on to the final presentation of the event. So Guus, over to you.
Nice, thank you. Okay, well, share my screen. Yeah, nice, green slides. Yeah, well, whoa, my whole face now green also. Thank you for having me as well. I'm Guus. I'm in the Central Student Council of TU Delft. That's a participation board, and we are one of the parties there. We stand for motivated and active students. And my personal policy fields are internationalization, student housing, integrity, the TU Delft finance, and profiling fund. and the participation board is discussing the policy and the decisions the board of the Delft makes, and we have to advise them and to give them consent doing so. So we also have quite a lot to say on student housing, so that's why I'm here to tell you something about it. Well, yeah, how to find a good student house. Also, always a couple of things to take care of. Of course, you have to choose if you want roommates, if you want to live in studio or just a regular student house, what the cost is, something about social rent, and I will abbreviate it on it later, and particular rent. Those are quite special. The distance from university, but Ida already told something about it, and the safeness, and that's, I guess, the main part why I'm here, about student fraud. So yeah, if you want to find a student house, there are a couple of options. And one of the biggest options in Delft is a student housing corporation. The biggest one in Delft is Duo. The most of the big student buildings you see are from Duo. And the other three of other ones are Camelot, Fior, and Student Hotel. And I'll explain something about them. Well, in Duo you have two types of buildings. You have, example, the Balpol, what's called. It's the one above, that's on campus, and the Eduperonlaan. That's where I live, actually, on the 14th floor. And those are examples of houses where you can have multiple housemates. So not particularly studios. The buildings are all students, and one thing about Duo is that it's quite affordable housing. It's mostly just big buildings. Also the Stieltjesweg, as you see here, it's the one on the above. Also, it's like the second highest building in the TU Delft. And the Roodholslaan, those are more studio buildings, so one room apartments. But still mostly students. You have a couple of, to be honest, quite old people that were here before Duo. So they're still on the flat or the building. But it's mostly students. And if you have around costs are like around 400 or 500 euros. So it's quite affordable. If you want to apply for Duo, you have to make an account in room. So for all the incoming international students, it's really important, if you want a Duo house, to sign up in room as quickly as possible, because the earlier you sign up, the higher you are on the list, and then you go first. So it's like first in, first out. So that's one big advice that I want to give, to sign up at room. You also have a building called Fior. It's also one of the bigger companies. It's also mostly studios. We have 3 buildings. Here are 2 of them. They're all both in the city center, and they are more expensive than Duo buildings, because Duo buildings are empty rooms that you rent, while the other 3 things I will talk about now are more facilitated buildings. They are furnished, and they have something like a lounge, or it's more regular dormitory, as well as a student hotel. It's quite new. It's around the station, the main station of the TU Delft, and it's also what's in the name. It's a student hotel, so it's also more like a hotel. It's also more expensive here, but it's quite the same as how it works. And they also have Camelot, and that's even more expensive. So if you really want to feel like a king, you can also look at this. But one other big thing that's more friendless is private housing. That's private. Everybody can put on their house on a site like this, like Kamernet or Funda, to sell their house. And you also have Woonnet Haaglanden. That's for social rent. That means that people with low income can have cheaper rents, cheaper buildings to live in. And students also have quite a low income. Most of them have negative income, so they can apply for social housing. And I also put in a link, like in the last couple of slides are all links that you can use to apply for this before you go to Delft. It's quite important to be as quickly as possible to sign up for it because the demand is higher. It's not only for students, it's also for regular citizens that have a lower income that want to live in a house in Delft. So the demand is higher, but also the houses are bigger because it's also for regular families. These are some normal private housing websites. Yeah, it's not that much to say about it. Also, the risk is higher because everybody can put on their stuff. It's quite something like eBay. You put in a house and you're responsible for your own decisions there. Another big thing that you can use to find student housing is social media, also just each other. Because a lot of international students in Delft have Facebook or WhatsApp groups where they can help each other with different problems. A good example of this is the TU Delft International Facebook group. As you can see, it has around 70,000 members, so quite a lot of people to help you with. Also a really great idea to get in that group. So if you are stuck with something or need help with something, you can always ask there, because I'm sure one of the 17,000 people is able to help. Otherwise I will, because I'm also in that group. So that's also a really great way to address a big amount of people to help you with stuff. Where sometimes also people put on their house to rent. You also have big WhatsApp groups. I'm also part of InterDelft. That's like an umbrella organization of all the international student associations. And that's one thing I really want to promote here, is to go in an international student association or a regular association, because you meet a lot of people there. It's good for your group if you come here to make friends, but it's also good to have great contacts that can also help you with avoiding fraud, because a lot of people are staying here longer than you are, and people are here already quite some time, and they know the best about some things, how to handle stuff. So if you're stuck with stuff in Delft as a student, it could be quite nice to have an association like this. Like this. So that's one thing I really want to promote. Go to an association, or quite a lot, and I'm sure there's something that will fit. And now the important part of this talk is how to avoid fraud. The TU Delft also made a website or a page on their site to help people with regular fraud. So that's one thing I want to talk about right now. I've quite a couple of slides on this, and the first thing I want to talk about is the most general fraud case of all. If something seems too good to be true, the chances are really big that it's fraud. So therefore it's really important to be as realistic. If you find a full house for like 100 euros a month, I'm pretty sure that's not that realistic. So always try to compare it with other buildings you see, other rentings, houses that you see, to see how realistic it really is. And one other big thing is fake advertisement. I already heard about students having applied for fake rooms on real housing platforms. The real housing platforms are quite dangerous in that sense, because everybody can put stuff on there. So therefore, it's also really important to check it. I will first give the common means of fraud, and then I will give the solution. So don't worry. Means of communications. Scammers sometimes ask for other, like maybe weird communication ways that you can't track. That's also a case of fraud, or like a sign of fraud. And people that are renting an apartment in the Netherlands that can't speak Dutch is also quite shady. So also be wary about that. you have fake websites. It's really easy to remake a website like Duo or the Student Hotel. Not really easy, but it's doable. So therefore, it's really really important to check the URL, the website code, to check if it's the real one. Because if you apply a fake one, that's the chances are really big that it's fraud. So always check the website that you're using, and also personal approach, because that doesn't happen that much. But if you are on a website and you want to apply for something, and somebody messages you in person directly, instead of using the whole housing portal, that's also a sign to be aware of, because it could also be fraud. The last three things are if the persons that are renting the building say that they are not in the Netherlands and they can't have you check the building, you don't have to accept it. You can also just say, yeah, then I don't need it, because as seen in, like, as I first talked about, sometimes scammers use fake advertisements. So if you can't check it, how can you be sure that it's real, especially if you are in our country? And scammers also could use money transfer by with semi-anonymous services. You can think about something like PayPal or Bitcoin, where it's harder to track where the money flows. If you use real bank accounts, then you can track where the money is and where the money came from. So it's also easier to get your money back in case of fraud. One thing to keep in mind. And the last thing that you can find is emotional manipulation, that people say, people make up a really sad story about, I don't know, maybe something, a family member died and they really need the money. That's also quite a good business strategy, but not really really clear one. So be aware of that. Don't be emotional manipulated. And now the important part, how to prevent all this. One thing to keep in mind, it's quite hard to find a room in Delft cheaper than 250 euros a month. That's quite impossible, actually. So if you find something cheaper than this, then you have to be really aware of fraud, because the chances are really big that you are that you're frauded. And the student rooms, one thing that also happens sometimes is that you have pictures on advertisements with stuff like a price list on the door, like hotels use, or general hotel stuff, maybe like a water cooker on the kitchen table, or like kind of weird stuff that or the telephone stuff that you don't see in a student house, but in a hotel. That those are also cases of fraud that could happen. In viewable rooms, I shouldn't trust. You shouldn't trust in viewable rooms. You should also always be able to check a room, because it's quite a big expense that you do. So always check it yourself, or have somebody else check it for you. And if you can check it, or can somebody have checked it, try to have somebody from an association have check it, or search it up on Google if it's a fraudulent case. So it's really important to actually check the room to avoid getting scammed. And also, if you have somebody that sells an apartment that lives outside of the Netherlands, also be really aware of that, because that's kind of a shield for them, because the police can't do that much about people that are doing criminal stuff from other countries. So that's a strategy that scammers could use to have more safe way to keep scamming, but something to keep aware of. Avoid sending a copy of your passport. If you do, mark the picture as a copy. You have a lot of websites that you can use just to put in like a watermark of copy or use for this. but not just a passport copy, because they can use it to do more scamming. They can use your information to make another profile or something. So be really aware with the use of your passport. In some countries, people use lawyers to, or weird agencies to have money transferred. We don't in the Netherlands. So if you have to send money to a lawyer, don't. Always ask for a regular bank account, and especially some bank account that's from the Netherlands or a Netherlands organization, because it makes the chance of getting your money back way bigger and way easier, because the police can do more stuff, of course, in the Netherlands and outside the Netherlands. So yeah, check the address. It's an offer. On the TU Delft website, there are also some addresses already that are used for scamming in the past. And scammers often steal pictures from buildings that are also on sold. So try to check if the pictures are shown up somewhere else, if the address is fraudulent, or check if the interior is matching the outside of the building. If you're a really small building surrounded with trees, and you see a picture of the interior that's really big with like a window view of a city or something, that also have to that's also maybe a case of scamming. So be aware. And after the initial contact, always ask for a telephone number, or for a telephone number. The Dutch telephone numbers start with +31. That's our country code, and the Dutch cities also have a city code. So if you have like a main phone number from a company, so it's not a mobile number, then it starts with 015. That's also for the surrounding small villages. But you can check if the city number matches the origin of the seller. But mostly be aware of the +31. And if people, sometimes people don't want to give the phone number, and that should ring a bell, because why wouldn't somebody that want to have a contact with you for more than 100 euros don't want to give their phone number? So those are a couple of cases, a couple of things you really need to be aware of, to keep in mind if you are looking for a room in Delft. If you got scammed, in case that you got scammed, you can contact the local police. I put in the phone number for outside the Netherlands and from within the Netherlands. You can also find them on the website, of course. And we also want you to contact the TU Delft, because they can put the fraud case on their website, so they can warn new students for that fraud case. They have a website with all the addresses that are used for frauds, and then they will put it in there, and then they will help you with handling the fraud case as well. So if you get scammed, please contact the police and the TU Delft. That's the best thing you can do. So in general, I would advise to avoid private housing from the start of your study, because it's harder to check student houses if you're not in Delft. And if you start with like a big company like Duo or something else, then you can be more flexible in Delft itself. So if you find a nice house there, then you can check it yourself, and then you can be more protected to scammers. You can also make more contacts, preferably from within the association. So that's maybe a good safe start. And also get in contact with the students in the Netherlands. I'm sure if you send an email to DISS, they will have people that can help you if you are from outside of the Netherlands. If you have questions, you can also ask the VSSD, STIP, or ORAS for help. So there are a lot of students in Delft that want to help you do general stuff like finding a good student house and to avoid being scammed. So that's also good advice, and of course the most important advice to be realistic and critical, because it's quite a big it's quite a lot of money that you spend on student housing. The final thing I want to talk about is maybe stay in your homeland. If you think that maybe I can also do studying from home. Now it's possible because everybody has to stay at home in the Netherlands, but that's not the general policy of the TU Delft. The TU Delft really wants to have a lot of practical stuff, want to have physical exams, want you to go to lectures, want you to meet other students. So it's actually not possible to stay in your homeland for studying at TU Delft. Of course, maybe you can go for some time, but you have a lot of project groups that you have to attend, and you have other stuff. So it's not the general policy that they want to have full on education online. That's now due to Corona. And you also will miss a lot of experience if you stay at home. One big thing of staying abroad, studying abroad, is all the new people that you meet, the new culture that you meet, and that all adds to the whole experience, to the whole learning process. So it's a really bad idea to stay at your homeland. So yeah, to answer that question. And if you have other questions, you can still always mail me, guus@oras.nl. You can contact Delft if you want to keep in contact with associations. Association like DISS, that's a big one. You can also contact the VSSD. They mostly come up for stuff like this if it combines the municipality and the TU Delft, because as I said, the TU Delft is not. They can be responsible for student housing, as in they can be owners of student housing. So it's harder for them to do stuff on that case. And those are some important websites that you can use. So if you want to have the slides, please send me an email or contact somebody of this webinar, and I will send it to you. And now, if you have any questions, you can also ask me now.
Perfect. Thank you for the presentation, Guus, and it was very informative. And for the people who joined in the middle, so we would share the presentations of all these, all the 2 presentations that we had today after the event. So we would mail all the participants with the presentations, so you won't miss any information. Now let's ask questions. Over to you, Anna.
Okay, so while signing up for the event, some questions were posed. So first question, would you recommend signing up for the housing service for the university, through the service that the university provides? So for example, Duo, would you recommend to sign it up?
If I would recommend Duo, yeah, sure. I also always lived in a Duo housing when I started studying. Especially Duo it's really big in Delft. It's the biggest organization, so it's also quite easier to find a room. But one thing that Duo does is giving the students that live in a house their own decision on who lives there next. So people can first search for a house themselves, and then it will be put on room. So if you want to find a good student house from Duo or just in general, it's easier to have contacts. And as I also said, it's important to sign up for a room, this website from Duo, as quickly as possible to be high on the list.
And is there some maximum and minimum time to stay with Duo?
No. Yeah, minimum 1 day, I guess.
And you have to be a
You have to be a student.
So you have to prove that you're a student. I think it's also for PhD maybe, but I'm not completely sure.
You have to be enrolled at TU Delft or another school. So that's you can be a working citizen staying in a duo building. But if you are an incoming student, for sure you can, because you are a student.
And there is a question in the chat. After how much time can you typically find a room in Duo?
It really depends on how you're looking for it. If you just sign up on Room and you do it really late, that's quite hard. Because as I said, the earlier you sign up, the earlier you'll get a room. So if you are planning to go to the Netherlands to study there, I would advise to sign already up for a room. And Duo places you in a building they have free, but you can also get in a Duo house from within the house itself. I live with 5 other students, and when I was in high school, I met with them it was kind of like an interview, and then they chose me to live here. So I bypassed the whole waiting list because the student house itself can choose who they want in their house for the first couple of weeks. So it's the best way to find a dual house as quickly as possible is to first sign up in Room as quickly as possible. Then you already have like an automatic way of getting a duo house, but that's quite slow. But if you have contacts or if you make contacts here in Delft, especially from within the associations, maybe people there are looking for another housemate and you can enroll directly in that house.
Okay, so you suggested, for example, Kamernet and Room.nl, and you usually need to pay for that. So what would you advise in order to pay less for all of these websites?
What do you mean to pay?
Because, for example, from Room.nl, you need to pay, I think, 35 or 39 euros. Then for Kamernet, I think it's also around that. And every time you search for some websites, you need to pay for it. So yeah, of course, it's good to be on a few websites and to pay it, because, for example, for a Room.nl, it's for 8 years. But still, it might be growing that you need to pay more and more.
I would at least advise to apply for Room. I don't know how expensive the woonnet, the Haaglanden woonnet, that's from the social rent is. But I wouldn't advise to go to Kamernet or something like that. If I would advise one thing, it's Room, because it's from the Duo housing, and Duo is by far the biggest and I think also the most safest housing in Delft.
Yeah, I would also recommend first Room and not like Woonnet Haaglanden. You also have to compete with so many people that in the Netherlands are already on a waiting list, and it can really be like 15 months of waiting. So I would like Room, I would definitely recommend doing, even though it is a bit of money. And I think for Kamernet, you can also use Roombase or just Facebook groups if you don't want to spend money on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and there is thank you for your answer. And there is from Lena question. I would like to ask if you know about an estimate of minimum cost of studio, including and excluding expenses.
Studio. Excluding expenses. Including and excluding. Okay.
It also depends if you're doing it like from a housing corporation, or if you are renting from what's it called, particular, privately.
Private.
Because if you rent it from a student housing association, it can be really like 300 inclusive or 320 inclusive. But if it's privately, it can be up to like 600. And if you're paying more, you're just paying too much. It can be more, but it's way out of the league that you should pay it. And I think for expenses, you can think of like 100 probably.
100. Oh, for expense, yeah, but it also really depends on where you will be living. I mean, if you go to Duo, then you have an unfurnished room, so with no chairs, no stuff like there. But it's also cheaper. I guess you will think about around 400 to 600 euros. I think that's a good range. But if you go to something like Sior, then you have furnished room. The student hotels also more expensive, and Camelot, they even have a private cinema. So if you have more luxurious facilities, the more you pay. So it really depends on where you're looking for. But I would say around 500 euros if you want to pin in one cost. Do you agree, Ida?
I was Googling something else. What's
You agree that if that's 500 euros, it's maybe a good estimate?
Yeah, well, it really depends, because I think student hotel, I think
Yeah, and I'm living in a student hotel now, and I'm paying, let's say, 760. It depends on the months, and it's quite a bit. But the bike is included, the laundry is included, and price. And it's I have a private room, 16 meters squared. There is a designed study lounges, shared spaces to connect with other students. So there are like such a benefits, although it's kind of expensive. But as a for the first year student, I think it was a good idea.
Yeah, you pay more, but you also get more, of course. But if you want to have a studio for something like the Stieltweg or Roodholst, I think you will look for something around 500 euros.
Less, I think.
Yeah, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I stay at Dior, the one in the front of the station, and I have 18 meters square room, and my total rent is 720 euros, and I get allowance. So with allowance, I pay 420. So that's quite affordable. You get your own space, and laundry is free. So we not pay anything extra. That's everything included.
Yeah. So let's answer one last question. We have a question from Malena. She asked, when accepting the place to study at the TU Delft, there is the option to pay 250 euros to sign up the TU Delft housing service when they partnered with various housing agencies. Is it worth doing so?
If it's from the TU Delft, I think so, because the TU Delft it's a company that really wants to help the students, because it's you pay to study there, and if you pay for something like this, I'm sure that works great. But still, I think something like room and making personal contacts is an easier and quicker and more and less expensive way to find a good student housing.
I'm also wondering where you found this, because what I'm thinking is, who is, like, if the TU Delft is asking 250 euros, that's a lot of money, and I'm not sure that I've never heard of this. Someone else might know more about this, but it could also be a scam or something. Oh no, it is from TU Delft, but that's a lot of money, I think, for.
Yeah, I think they asked 228 euros for us. So it's a one-time registration fee, and I think it's non-refundable. If you don't get a house, they will give the money back. But if you get the credentials to book a house, I think it's not refundable.
Okay. I also, just another question that I saw, I have about the subletting. I have like a contract, and I'll send it here as well. So here you can see a kind of contract that you can have if you want to get a subletting agreement, which might be helpful.
And there was also one question from Tudor. That's the, I hope I can pronounce it correctly, huurtoeslag apply to, yes, to apply to housing like the student hotel, Shore and Camelot.
So I'm actually not completely sure. I don't think student hotel does that, but then Anna probably knows better. I was also Googling it just now. And Sior was having allowance, right?
I think it depends on the type of housing that you're taking.
Yeah.
So if you take studios, you will get allowance, the huurtoeslag. So if you take shared housing, you won't get allowance. So the only criteria is you should have your own door and your own kitchen and your own toilet. So that is the basic.
You have stuff like Duo that that also get like huurtoeslag without having an own kitchen. So there are also houses that still can apply for huurtoeslag with that.
But if you are looking for a Duo house, I already sent a link as well in here. It's at the Duo link. There you can see if the house that you're looking at can get rent allowance as well.
Okay. Perfect. So I think we answered most of the questions. If there are any unanswered questions, we will give you the answers by mail. And we would also share the presentations after the event is over. So we would like to thank Ush and Ida for their presentation. And we would also like to thank VSSD for finding the speakers and making this event possible. Thank you, everyone. And if you want to participate in the future events of DISS, you can sign up in the website. So I would also share the link in the chat. So you can go to the website and sign up and become a member of DISS. So that's it. And thank you all for participating in this webinar. Wish you a wonderful evening or afternoon or whatever it is in different time zones. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Well, thank you for having me, guys. Went quite well, right?
Oh, it's Hush. I'm wondering who's talking.